Critical Listening, episode 12. We are back with another doozy, another headlines episode. Once again, we are your hosts. My name's Max Alper.
My name is Liz Pelly.
And we got a slightly different type of headlines because we were bringing in a guest journalist to discuss with us for the second half of our episode. Normally it's just you and me running the headlines, but we have with us as our guest for the second half, we have Jill Mapes, second Hearing Things journalist on the pod. We will get them all on.
Gotta support the worker-owned music media outlets.
That's right.
I gotta say that this month it was pretty hard to pick two stories. There were so many different headlines.
Yeah.
And I'll use this as an opportunity to say, please subscribe to Critical Listening so that we can make headlines episodes more frequently and so that
Yes.
we can cover more stories as they unfold, because this was a hard one. But as Max said, yeah, we knew for this episode that we had to cover the Wasserman story. And by that, we mean the headlines that have been rolling out across the music media involving the presence of music industry executive Casey Wasserman in the newly released batch of Epstein files. So in the second half of the show, we have Jill Mapes on talking about a piece that she did for Hearing Things about why artists speaking up about Wasserman being in the Epstein files matters. And then for the first half of the show, we're talking about a headline from, of course, where else? Music Business Worldwide.
My goats. My goat.
But this headline, I feel like, we're talking about a headline from MBW related to something that popped up in Spotify's 2025 Q4 earnings call. But I will say that, yeah, this also maybe doubles as I read the transcript to the Spotify Q4 earnings call, so you don't have to. So
that includes
also,
me. You're preventing me from stabbing my own eyeballs out. So thank you, Liz, for doing this public service for everyone.
well, if you appreciate the public service, you can subscribe to Critical
Like,
Listening.
comment, subscribe to Critical Listening,
Uh,
patreon.com/critical listening.
and yeah, we'll keep reading the Spotify earnings call transcripts so that you don't have to, because trust me, you don't want to.
I do not. So Liz, please, can you enlighten us a little bit here? What's going on? This was the end of 2025 Q4 earnings call for the public, right? Like, this was fully released out. This wasn't just for investors, though we could find it on investors.spotify.com.
Yeah, so this is from February 10th. Earlier in the month, Spotify had its earnings call where a number of its executives updated shareholders and stakeholders on their fourth quarter financial results. So the headline that we're talking about is this piece from Music Business Worldwide. The headline is Spotify eyes AI derivatives as new revenue stream for artists, says its tech to let fans make remixes and covers is ready. And yeah, unsurprisingly, AI was a big topic of conversation in this earnings call. On these calls, the executives make prepared remarks and then they also take questions from shareholders. So notably, this was the earnings call for Daniel Ek's last quarter as the CEO of Spotify. So it started with him sort of like giving some almost like closing remarks. And then Gustav Soderstrom and Alex Nordstrom, the incoming current co-CEOs of the company, each both spoke. Yeah, who else did we have on this call? We had Daniel Ek, Alex Nordstrom, new co-CEO of Spotify. I love to also remind people, also former executive at King, the game company that makes Candy Crush. Yes. Before Spotify.
Yes.
He helped lead the effort on Facebook Games at the company that makes Candy Crush, which I think is just like actually like really appropriate background for someone sort of like involved in the sort of gamification of music that now is kind of like taking over.
Totally.
um,
It's the like, CEO of screen addiction, right? Like this is
mm.
how do we keep you glued to the screen? Unfortunately, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Sure. And then we had Gustav on the call, who we'll talk about a bunch today. I've picked out a few different things that he said on the call that I think are really fascinating. And then, in addition to the head of investor relations, Brian Goldberg, we also have on the call Spotify's chief financial officer, Christian Luiga, Daniel X, friend from the Swedish defense industry.
Ah, yes.
So can't forget about the former defense executives who are on the Spotify earnings call.
Just a bunch of down to earth music guys, just some working class artists here, right?
Mhm. Um, so yeah, I mean, this is a call where they were talking about how in the last quarter of 2025, paid subscriptions were up 10%, monthly active users were up 11%. They're kind of like celebrating these numbers. But just in terms of like the sheer numbers that they were reporting, the one that stuck out to me the most and that I think is really important to talk about is, in their summary, both on the call and that they now have on their website. There's kind of like on their website, you can find the call, but then you can also find this slideshow where they sort of summarize the takeaways. And they were highlighting their improved gross margin. They kind of include the statistic that Q4 2025, they had a 33.1% gross margin, which means that their ability to make money, like to profit, has improved.
Yes.
And, obviously they're trying to explain why their gross margin is improving. And they're talking about like, advertising improving, subscription prices going up. But most interesting to me is that, like, in multiple instances in their earnings call and in their summary of the takeaways, they're talking about content costs, and they're specifically talking about how revenue growth has outpaced music costs. So when we look at a company like Spotify, like, it's really important to remember that when they talk about music costs, they're talking about royalties paid to rights holders.
Yes.
And when they talk about revenue growth outpacing music costs, they're talking about making more money and getting to keep more of it. And in multiple instances, they talk about gross margins improving and being impacted by marketplace programs. And when Spotify talks about marketplace programs, they're talking about discovery mode. They're talking
Yes.
about, marketplace is the part of the company where they sell promotional products to artists. So there's multiple points in this Q4 update where they're basically bragging about how their ability to improve their gross margins has been directly affected by convincing musicians to accept lower royalty rates in exchange for algorithmic promotion. And I just think that this is really important to keep in mind. Like, I think that some people in the streaming industry at Spotify like to sort of like downplay discovery mode, and sort of like to kind of just make it seem like this kind of like necessary evil. This is just kind of how promotion works in the streaming era. It only impacts these few areas of the platform. It's just on autoplay and radio and daily mix. It's giving artists the ability to have control over, what songs they want to like boost up in algorithmic recommendations, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, no, this is a program that Spotify doubles down on in order to improve their gross margins.
Making a lot of money through our new digital payola that they still deny is a prominent bottom line for them, right? Like
Mhm.
they still continue to, or rather, people involved, like you said, still continue to downplay this, but we're hearing from them directly. This is driving profits for them.
Mhm.
And this is again like their second year of profit, right? Third or second?
Yeah, yeah, second year.
Right.
Mhm. And yeah, I think also like it hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the past year, I think, the
Hmm.
impact of discovery mode, because people are rightfully like so focused on AI and so focused on other horrible things that Daniel Ek has done or said. And, it can be hard to sort of like keep up with like all of the different reasons to be critical of this business model. But yeah, I feel like, we shouldn't forget about
Yeah.
discovery mode and different instances of payola like practices and the real financial impact that they do have on independent artists.
Right. I feel like if we were to talk to anybody in our circles, right, which we've discussed might be a bubble to some extent. Like we've talked, a year of Mood Machine has shifted the conversation in a good direction amongst like-minded folks. But we still need to maintain an eyes on the prize here. These guys are making more money now than ever before, despite it seeming like the cultural clout might be dwindling amongst several independent musicians and practitioners. That they're finding ways to squeeze even more water out of this stone.
Hmm. Yeah, and they're clearly also in pursuit of lots of other new
Oh
ways
yeah.
to keep attracting investors, improving their margins. And I think that also is really clear from the parts of the phone call, the earnings call that did focus on AI. On this call, Gustav Soderstrom talked a lot about AI. He is someone who in the past has liked to say things like, for Spotify, AI is the product. Spotify has long been an AI company, blah, blah, blah. And when he says that for Spotify, AI is the product, which is something that he said in a podcast interview a couple of years ago, he means that the personalization features like their sort of long history of collecting mass amounts of data on users and then using it to recommend quote unquote the perfect song or perfect podcast at the perfect moment every time. That type of personalization engine is like the product that they have.
Right.
That's sort of like how he views this. But on this call, they were talking specifically also about generative AI. And I think the reason why I bring all this up in terms of like how he has like long thought about the Spotify product is that he clearly is trying to position Spotify as like, there's all these new generative AI startups out there, but we've been thinking about this for a really long time.
Right.
In this call, he refers to Spotify as like the music industry's R&D department. When talking about generative AI, he kind of talks about like these two different types of Gen AI or these two different instances. So he talks about, generative AI tracks made on other platforms being uploaded onto Spotify. And then he talks about how Spotify could, provide tools that would allow people to remix pre-existing tracks that are already on streaming. So it's basically like the creation of new material using AI and then the kind of like remix stuff, like using AI
Right.
to alter tracks that are already on streaming.
He
Uh,
refers to, and he's referring to that. That's what he's referring to as the musical derivatives, right? I've seen this term derivatives used a lot as a what he says, quote, an untapped opportunity for artists to make money off of existing IP, right? So
yeah.
meaning things that are derived from things that are already on the platform made by a human being, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's what he means when he talks about AI derivatives, which is really interesting because it's like, all AI media is derivative.
Right. Everything is stolen data at some point, but now we can
Yeah,
get in on the fun. Don't you want to remix yourself or your favorite artists, right?
yeah, totally. And there's actually also like a really good book from last year by Andrew DeWard called Derivative Media: How Wall Street Devours Culture. We should really have him on at some
Oh
point to talk
yeah.
about how like
Book
this
club.
idea of how like Gustav Soderstrom's idea of derivative music compares with his theory of, the whole media being impacted by sort of adjacent but very different ideas. Anyway, one thing that Gustav said on this call that really stuck out to me that I thought was so fascinating, while talking about, this idea of like derivative music or remix content or whatever, he says, quote, uh, everything we see tells us listeners want to interact with their favorite music. And by that, he means like interact with it by turning it into remixes or
The
whatever.
fuck are you talking about?
Quote, and many artists want to let them, creating new revenue from their existing catalog. In other media, like movies and TV, existing IP is incredibly valuable. But in music, artists have not had a real way to monetize existing catalog through AI, which is just like an absolutely wild thing to say in a streaming era where like catalog is such a huge part of the business. Like, and
Right.
the AI that already drives Spotify, that drives TikTok, that drives like short form video culture. Like that is an example of like AI completely privileging catalog.
Yeah.
Like there's so many stats about how such a vast amount of music listening that happens on streaming involves catalog.
Yeah.
And it's so much harder for like new artists to figure out how to like connect with audiences in a digital listening environment that's so catalog centric, blah, blah, blah. So I just like thought that was such an interesting statement to make. And then he goes on to say, like, quote, because the absence of a rights framework has kept AI mostly focused on net new creation, we want to work with the industry to fix that. So what he's saying is basically like, Spotify already has the technology ready to go to allow rights holders to do these sorts of like remix tools on Spotify, but there's not the right kind of like rights framework ready to do the licensing and to, get people paid, etc. But yeah, that's clearly like the thing that they're most interested in when it comes to how they'll be sort of envisioning a Gen AI product on their platform. Like a few
Right.
episodes ago, we talked about when Spotify announced these deals with the major labels to license the music for generative AI. And this was kind of, in some ways, sort of like a follow up on that, sort of giving a little bit more concrete detail to what it is that they might do with those licenses.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it all sounds very similar to like we're in this in all media right now, just like a race to recycle as much IP as possible and find new ways to recycle things. It's the same thing as like, why is there just a new Marvel movie every 6 months? It's just it's to me it evokes this image of a just zero future, no imagination of what something new could possibly be, but also like putting a mirror up to this executive C-suite sort of class as far as like they themselves are not interested in music, new music, like they might have their own taste and things like that, but they don't see new ideas. They see that as risk, right? Versus
Mhm.
seeing something that's already shown some commercial success from 50 years ago, some classic rock tune or something like that, or something from the 80s, as a way to tap back in to capitalizing on that. And now they have new technological tools to do that, and to allow users to do that. So it's like hands off. You could remix this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, it's like if you invest a lot, sorry, if you make investments into types of tools that can be used to create new IP out of the IP that you already own or a new path for monetizing the IP that you already own, like, what you don't have to do then? Like, you don't have to pay advances to
Right.
new
Right.
musicians.
Yeah.
Like,
Bottom line beneficial for rights holders for
yeah.
once again not having to pay people.
And I
Um
feel like no one wants to talk about this because right now the conversation is so focused on like, okay, why is everyone talking about AI deals? It's because it's like, oh, we want to like make sure that the rights are there for attribution, get people paid, credit compensation, like make sure that the artists whose work is in the training data are being fairly paid. But it's like, okay, why do they really want these AI deals? And it's like, you can't ignore the fact that there's probably someone in a boardroom somewhere saying, if we have the ability to make new IP out of the IP we already own, that like somewhere along the chain, we might be able to pay artists less,
Right, right.
you
Or
know,
just
through,
cut them out entirely from
yeah,
this.
or
But
spend less on A&R or whatever.
exactly. But that to me again, it's like reflecting this cynicism uh within the higher upper echelons of the industry where it's they don't see a future of anything new, right? Like it's all novelty. It's
Hmm.
turning sync music into the only type of music, right? Like it's turning the most commercial background or novelty. You had mentioned this before, like, you know, what is the appeal here for the average user? It's most likely going to be novelty. It's most likely going to be Peter Griffin doing a duet with Lady Gaga or something like that, right?
Hmm.
What is the appeal for the average person? It's something goofy, but like that's what they see as the shining star for the future of the industry, and that is just bleak, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Um, Something else I should say, like, just in terms of sort of, I think that this call gave us a little bit of a glimpse into sort of like the Gustav Soderstrom vision for Spotify,
Mm,
which not that it's been that hard to get this already. The man does so many media appearances and has done so many podcasts the past few years that like if you really wanted to dig into his thinking, it has not been impossible. He's someone who says in his LinkedIn bio that Spotify is his mission in life. Is
cool.
something like worth noting. But yeah, he kind of talked a bit in this about what he sees as, quote, the next evolution of Spotify. And he used this phrase a few times, quote, delivering the world's most intelligent agentic media platform. He used the word,
Agentic.
yes, he used the word agentic many times. And he talked about people speaking to Spotify a lot. He talked about how over the past year, they really like reimagined the product to revolve around this idea of people talking to Spotify, whether it be literally verbally talking to AI DJ or through text talking to the prompted playlist feature. And I think like even in my book, I may have written that the early version of prompted playlists they unrolled in beta seemed like just another attempt to collect a new form of data
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
from users. And on this call, I thought it was really interesting that he literally said, quote, that they're quote building yet another unique data set to improve our experience.
Great.
And by that he meant like, he talked about it as a language to music data set. So
Oh, fantastic.
I thought that was like kind of interesting, just to as like another kind of like yeah glimpse into how the new co-CEO of this company is thinking. And I think it also is like, when we talk about these new co-CEOs, like Alex Nordstrom has historically been on the business side of things, and Gustav has historically been on the product side of things. So when we think about like which of these two co-CEOs stands to sort of have like more influence over shaping the user experience, the product experience, we're kind of talking about Gustav Soderstrom's vision a bit more.
Totally. Totally. And you talk about in the book, you know, much of the way in which they had acquired data in the earlier years, let's say pre AI years, and like any other online platform was much more covert, a little less obvious, let's say, versus anybody using a chat bot nowadays, anybody using these services, like they're very clearly taking information on you. And now it just seems so blatantly obvious if you're going to have what? Siri or a chat GPT type agentic AI thing that's just like, how are you feeling today, Max? Are you interested in listening to some, are you going to the gym? You want to listen to some grindcore? Things like that, where it's just like becoming so much more obvious what this extractive model as far as like the new data stream for them, how they're going to get it. It's because we are going to deliberately feed it to them this time by just talking through by being lonely. You
Yeah.
know, it's
No, it's a good point. I mean, in the early years, like earlier years, the data that they had was really like playlist titles, playlist
yes,
descriptions, what
yes.
songs you put on a playlist, and then obviously like every click on the platform. But now it's like, yeah, it's like enter user data here, please.
Yo, it was
Empty
like,
box.
oh, this person's really listening to a lot of Midwest emo. Like, let's definitely sell them some Zoloft ads or something like that, versus now it's just like, how are you feeling? It was like, well, thanks for asking, Spotify agentic AI. I'm feeling really shitty right now and I need something to boost my mood. Like,
Yeah.
we are handing all of it over to them. We're giving them the keys, man.
And the way they frame this too, like on this call, Gustav Soderstrom referred to prompted playlist as a way to quote, literally write your own algorithm, which is just not
What?
what prompting is. And I just want to point out that even Glenn McDonald, who was one of like the early architects of like recommendation on Spotify, posted on Blue Sky and wrote, letting you prompt is not controlling the algorithm. Like, it's like even the guy who helped, create music recommendation on Spotify says that prompted playlist is not, quote, controlling the algorithm. So,
Jesus,
important
man.
point, I think.
Yeah.
um,
One particular thing that really pissed me off is this it continues to piss me off, not just here but in this conversation of the usage of AI for musicians, right? Is this horrible bad faith argument being made of just like, well, was the electric guitar cheating, replacing the
mhm,
acoustic guitar? Was the synthesizer or the workstation replacing this and that? And it's this constant sort of we are not taking responsibility for how people use these tools. It's just a continuation of this development of music technology. And he says, in the report, when asked, what how much music is actually being made by AI these days, he quotes, "Are you allowed to use an electric guitar, a synthesizer, or a DAW, or an
mhm,
AI?" Or a more complicated question, how much AI? Like 1, 15, 20%, 100%? We don't think that's our decision to make. And that's just such a perfect deflection when asked like, is this going to make slop? And it's like, well, hey, we're not the ones making the slop. This is just a new innovation that we leave to you, the user, and or the artist to decide how to use it. And it's just like, come on, man. Like,
mhm.
it's the platform's eating itself here, and I only foresee the spammy tracks, as they call it, this problem of theirs being compounded by making these tools in house, rather than bad faith third parties allowing you to then distribute to their platforms without any reinforcement of rules against spammy tracks. So I just wanted to mention that one. I always get particularly pissed off for obvious reasons when they want to bring in like, how is this affecting the workflow of real artists, right? It's like, you don't fucking care about that, dude. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I also kind of feel like, relatedly, something to like keep an eye out for this year is I feel like for a while there has been this like question of like, will the music that AI spammers make start to sound more like, quote unquote, like mainstream pop music, passable music, etc. But I think there's also this question of like, is the music that the mainstream rights holders and the mainstream music industry gets behind and co-signs and pushes out going to start sounding more like, the AI spam tracks.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. This problem will compound itself, and the question is just like, will will it take off with listen like the most passive of listeners that might have like a favorite pop star, like Swifties are not just listening to Taylor Swift's music, they are they want everything about her life. Like for some reason my Instagram recommendations is serving me a lot of Pink Pantherist fan pages, in which like they're doing all these funny little like candid clips of her in interviews just being like funny and goofy. And it's like even if you're not a Pink Pantherist fan, like you can appreciate that like real true fandom is a vertical integration of all aspects of the artist's life, from their fashion to their mannerisms to the music itself. And so like are we going to see that replaced, that type of fandom replaced? I don't think right now we are, but like anything, you give it a full generation of manufacturing consent, it's going to affect people's listening habits and consumption habits no matter what. And so time will tell whether this is, going to be the compounded problem that I foresee it to be. I hope that I'm wrong here. But I mean, I don't know. We need a full reset. This whole period is just making me yearn for like sleazy A&R guys in the 60s and 70s that were just like, I'm gonna go find you a teenager making music that you don't understand, and I'm gonna feed them drugs, and we're gonna make something crazy, and the suits are gonna hate it, but they're gonna have to trust me on this. Like those days are long gone, man.
I don't know if I'm nostalgic for that,
you know
but
well, that's how
definitely
bad things
for
are, is that
something
it's making
else.
me
I'm nostalgic for like the New Deal music programs where
yes.
artists were just
Oh
like
yeah.
given money to play public concerts in the park.
Yes, that's right. That's the difference between you and me.
Yeah.
Going back to FDR on this one. Oh man. Well,
Anyway,
you know.
yeah, surely soon we'll have an episode of Critical Listening that's more solutions oriented.
The optimism episode.
Oh yeah, let's
Awesome.
go.
Well, this was a fun, positive read. Certainly a doom scroll. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to talk about the other doom scroll for today. We have once again, February 2026, another month of doom scrolls. Not a whole lot of blooming going on. Should we get to your conversation with Jill?
Yeah, let's get into it. So, for our second headline today, we are talking about a topic that has been in the news media, but also in the music media a lot the past few weeks, which has been the 3 million pages of Epstein files released at the end of January. And the reason that the Epstein files have been in the music media is because of the number of music industry executives who appear in them, including the executive Casey Wasserman. So, to talk about this story, we have Jill Mapes, one of the co-founders of Hearing Things and a longtime music and culture writer. And we're specifically going to be talking about Jill's piece, The Wasserman Exodus is a Different Kind of Reckoning, that was published on Hearing Things on February 11th. So thank you, Jill, for joining the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
I guess to start, could you just explain a little bit more who Casey Wasserman is, what kind of power he has in music, and why this has become such a huge headline in the music press?
Sure. Okay, so Casey Wasserman, up until last week, he has a whole talent agency with many different wings, like Wasserman Music, and they're primarily were in the sports zone to begin with, and a couple of years ago they absorbed this agency called Paradigm, and they've made more of an effort to get into the live music space. So he has this whole empire. He's definitely a big nepo baby, and his grandfather had been in Hollywood for a long time, having a talented agency, and so he's somebody who's really grown up sort of in the highest echelons, of Hollywood behind the scenes players, I would say. So him ending up in the Epstein files was not that surprising given how powerful and sort of his ties to wealth, you know what I mean? That even though he was a young man at the time, he's one of these types of people that's just very powerful behind the scenes. He crossed paths with Maxwell, G. Maxwell, as it were, and had a series of flirty emails. I wouldn't even calling them flirty even seems like underselling it. Like it really felt like they were talking in code in a way. He's like asking to book a massage and when can I see you in this like tight leather outfit and just like, oh, I miss you, where are you? And it sort of echoes some of the like friendly tone that you find in the Epstein files of this or that person, just like, oh, we're on the island. Oh, we're on this island. We're with this person, and it has a flavor of that. It's not, that sort of tone is common in the Epstein files. So, he was married at the time. He had children, this was in 2003. So his claim is that this was before Epstein's misdeeds came to light, which is indeed, I think that was 5 years later, 5 or 6 years later. But people had been reporting on it. Like Gawker had been trying to talk about it for years. And it's part of why so many rich people were trying to fund their demise, So I don't think it was any secret even in 2003. So, these emails came to light. People are very frustrated because not only does Wasserman have his own, private company with 4,000 agents, he said in an interview last month, he's also like the chairman of all of the Olympic committee stuff happening in LA and various members of the city council. Now I saw the mayor, Karen Bass, is like also calling for him to resign. So that's kind of where he's who he is.
Just also to like emphasize kind of like the power that this man has in the music business. Like even reading in your piece for Hearing Things, you mentioned that Wasserman Music's touring roster includes Lorde, Kendrick Lamar, SZA, Tyler the Creator, Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, Kalani, Turnstile, Noah Kahan, and you also quote this Hits Daily double piece about Coachella, published
Yeah.
right before the scandal broke. And you quote that article saying, quote, Team Watts represents nearly 1/3 of artists booked to perform at Coachella, more than double the number of its closest competitor. Like, I didn't even realize until reading your piece, like, quite how many pop stars are represented by this one agency.
Yeah, no, it wasn't until I kind of dug into it a little bit more that I was like, oh wow, okay, they had lost some clients over the years. Like I think Billie Eilish is like she had been with them, she's not with them anymore kind of thing. But yeah, honestly, it's kind of staggering. And it's kind of staggering in the way that it felt like that echelon of talent was just never going to be, they were never going to speak on it. Like the fact that Chappell spoke on it is very much like she's the type of person who speaks out on this shit and I think feels an obligation to. And I think that that's really necessary, but it was like one of those things where I would have been shocked if, Kendrick is going to take his time to be part of that. But I think it really matters, because that's really the only sort of public leverage. It's like, so, Chappell Roan was the biggest person to speak out, and said that she was leaving the agency. I liked the part of her statement leaving where she kind of acknowledges the hard place that this puts agents, and sort of having to overlook things. So she says, no artist, agent, or employee should ever be expected to defend or overlook actions that conflict so deeply with our own moral values. And, I think I saw internally there were, in the industry, there were people saying like, and even some of the artists said, some of the indie artists said like, hey, don't take this out on the agents. But it's like, I don't really know what else one does because I understand the agents aren't going to speak out. They're going to try to handle this internally, which is what they did. But I think the wave of support for different artists, so it's a lot of indie bands in addition to Chapel. Like Wednesday spoke out, Carly from Wednesday spoke out really quickly, and they said they had left the agency, which, you know, it's a shame. They had a really great agent. I'm hope with this restructuring of what's going to happen, you know, they'll they'll work it out. But with Wasserman's move into the space, it's like it's not just these giant agents, you know, like I'm thinking of the agent Andrew Morgan and specifically who worked with Wednesday, worked with Angel Olsen for like a decade plus now, had worked at Billions for a long time. So there are people there who have been just like long time booking like indie rock tours who got, you know, kind of, you know, caught into this web of Wasserman acquiring things and acquiring more agents and stuff like that. And not just getting those A-list clients, but getting, you know, the meat and potatoes touring indie bands. So some of the other people that were clients of Wasserman, you know, that said that they were going to leave the agency was like Water From Your Eyes and Wise Blood. The Dropkick Murphys were very blunt. I loved them. They were like dudes in Epstein files. We're out, you know, and I just love that it's that simple for them and for a lot of artists. And then you had some other people that were very much like Alexis from Sleigh Bells made this whole post trying to advocate for the agents, but it really just seemed like kind of a way to say, well, you know, we're small potatoes, so it doesn't really matter if we leave, which I think is just, you have to embrace your own power and your own autonomy in a situation, you know, sort of was saying we should have systemic change. And it's like, look who's the president. I don't know that they're going to, you know, take this into consideration exactly on the highest levels of the government, holding businesses accountable. So yeah, he there was a lot of, you know, noise from artists, but then also there were stories coming out of the trades last week, like, oh, the agents are furious and behind the scenes artists are threatening to walk, and, you know, really wanting him to like sell off the music part in particular. And then at the end of last week, he announced he was going to sell all of Wasserman, which is very surprising to me that that some part of that wouldn't be held back. But I think in many ways is best case scenario. It just kind of depends on, well, is he actually, you know, giving up full ownership, or is he going to still have a stake in it? Is it, you know what I mean? Like there's so many ways that they could sort of conceal his involvement on the back end. But I think part of him doing that also was because he's trying to hold on to the Olympics position.
I kind of want to just like dig in a little bit more to the types of artists that did speak out because, like you pointed
Yeah.
out, you know, there are all these pop stars represented by Wasserman Music who, other than Chapel Roan, are like nowhere to be seen. I mean, except for Billie Eilish, who already left years ago. But for the most part, it is like, you know, Best Coast, Wednesday, Water From Your Eyes, Wise Blood, like, you know, independent artists who are repeatedly told they have no power are told the things that like Alex from Sleigh Bells is saying in this post, like what we
Yeah.
do doesn't matter. It's not like we can't change anything, but like actually like it kind of seems like, you know, maybe all of these independent artists speaking out did have some sort of impact. Like, you know, we can't know for sure, but something I was thinking about is like, you know, who knows, like there could be a reality in which like Chapel Rowan is influenced or inspired by seeing Best Coast post something or Wise Blood post something, you know, like we never know what kind of impact our actions will take. But yeah, I was just wondering what you think about like what this says about power in music, or what this says about like this narrative that like independent musicians have no influence and what they do doesn't matter.
Well, I think it's interesting, and I'll give you a little bit of like just the background stuff that not even background, I can talk about it, but it's like I know a music manager who is very like saw the Wasserman thing, like many people in the indie music industry noticed it first. Like people who are not artists were found that very quickly, and I know several people that were posting about it just from being in the music industry. Like Greg Katz was posting about it, and this manager I know, Christian Stavros, was posting about it. And Christian said that he, you know, like they were like trying to get it out there to just get people's managers to pay attention first, to notice that it would be a liability. So I do think maybe some manager community kind of connection happened, because at one point he said, "Oh, like Chapel's manager wants to do a call." You know what I mean? And that was like days before she put out her statement. So I think that there's probably a lot of behind the scenes talk where it's like, yes, Chapel Roan is a huge star, but Chaperone's, I hate to be like, but she's also gay, and managers are gay, and all the gay people don't want to support creeps. But I feel like there's more of a stake of this is really would not be this would not fly with her, and this is not good for her brand. So you can understand, even in the most cynical way, the way a manager would go like, "Uh-oh, let me look into that." So I think there was some of that happening from like almost the indie music professionals trying to say, "Hey, but people with more power, look at this." So I think you're right. I do think this stuff travels. To your point about like just who was speaking out, I mean, yeah, a lot of them are bands that are comprised of have a woman member or a queer member, um, or you know, people that I think, I don't want to say they have the most to lose, but like they're not people with huge leverage. You're like, oh yeah, Sylvan Esso is not a band with massive leverage, but I think in a way they're like, I'm at the bottom of the whole heap. I'm a lowest priority. Like, why would I stay here? So I think in a way, a number of people that are maybe not so hugely important to the Wasserman sort of bottom line, they can still make noise and they can still point people to something that is not right, you know?
Yeah, or maybe even just like straight up have more agency over like what they're allowed to say without feeling they have to like run it by 100
Yeah.
different people. And yeah, to me, it just kind of, it was like illuminating, because I feel like with artist organizing, a lot of times there's this idea that like, well, like we just need to get someone really famous to like speak on this thing or like sign on with our action. But it's like change happens from the bottom, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I know. And I do think too, you have to imagine like just the material stakes of like, you're an indie band, and by speaking out and saying this, you're not like necessarily losing jobs for like tons of people in your crew that don't have autonomy, don't have a say like in this, that any sort of blip in your schedule or whatever, canceled dates, like you have to think, yeah, like Chapel probably has more to lose in the situation, even just thinking of the people that she supports with her live shows, you know? So I think, yeah, you're right. Yes, they feel indie artists have more room to do that, because they are like, it is really just me. And if I'm, we all know the state of touring. My whole feeling too with the Epstein files is that there's so many things that we're powerless to, and we just watch all of this stuff come out, and then it's just kind of like, I don't want to say that like Casey Wasserman is like, okay, we have somebody that there can be like a material fallout or some sort of consequence. Like, I don't want to say he's like a victim in that way, but it's like there's so little justice in the entire thing. There will be so little justice that if you're like, if there's any way to just be like, I don't want to do business with this guy. I think that there's that feeling too, because of what it is. It's even bigger than like, you know, like the Coachella bands like dropping out of Coachella because of the Auschwitz ties to questionable donations and family first funds. You know what I'm talking about.
mhm.
That it's like, I think something like this is even heightened morality, because the Epstein files is just such a we will get, like I said, we will get no justice from it. It is
Mhm.
such a ridiculously unfair, cruel thing that involved so many people that we trusted in positions of power. So
Mhm.
I think that plays a role too in just like the basic human decency of the thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, because I guess on like a grimmer note, it's also a reminder that like at least sometimes I think the general public doesn't think about how, you know, going and buying a ticket to a concert or supporting a musician who they like could in some way be
Hmm.
producing wealth for, like, you know, what I've seen lots of reporters refer to as the Epstein class, that like, you know, this
Yeah.
class of people who are so implicated in protecting each other in these files are also a class
Yeah.
of people that like, yeah, touch everything, including independent music to some extent.
Yeah. Well, your that comment makes me think too, you know, the wealth disparity within music. Indie musicians, they are so much more, they're so far from the Epstein class. You know, it's like absolutely, I could see a very wealthy like athlete being like, this is not my business, like just as a like rich person code in a way that like being not of that world. I think too there's a real motivation to just have no tolerance for that. Like, how dare you, we make so little from touring already, why would we line your pockets with a fucking penny, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, just to point to the water from your eyes statement, I feel like the water from your eyes statement, like, just a group of musicians with no need to protect any type of connection to this world. Like, we
Yeah.
unequivocally stand with the victims and survivors of abuse and trafficking, they wrote. This includes all of those who have been abducted by ICE. May oppressors fall to the furthest pits of oblivion. There's no
Fuck
future
yeah.
for the cruel and the corrupted. It is like,
Fuck
like
yeah.
mic drop.
Yeah, well, I feel like we've talked about this so many times of like just believing that there can be another world created, like that the infrastructure that as it exists, you don't have to just go along with it. So I like to think too that some of these bands speaking out and just like whether they stay with their agents now that Wasserman doesn't, you know, isn't going to own the company or whatever the case, but just like if it gets artists thinking like we can create a different way or we shouldn't, you know, just something that doesn't something that aligns with our values being important, like that's a step in the right direction to just get people thinking and considering, you know, that sort of what's the trickle down, okay, who owns this company. But yeah, if it can just kind of be a win in a way and people can be like, yeah, okay, we do have some power if we use our voices in unison.
Well, thank you so much. Can we end by you telling us like how people can find your article and support the work that Hearing Things is doing if they want to see more like this?
Oh, I would love to tell you about it. So we're at hearingthings.co. This ran in our blog section. So if you just click at the top, but you know, we run on subscriptions. We offer a lot of good stuff if you subscribe. So hopefully I'll see you out there. We have listening rooms and we have good stuff like this and a lot more. So thank you, Liz, for chatting with me about it and love what y'all are doing. So yeah, just like friend of the pod, happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Critical Listening Podcast. The show was written and created by Liz Pelly and Max Alper and produced and engineered by Nick Zanka. You can support the show by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/criticallistening, where you'll have early access to episodes before they hit the public platforms, as well as our Discord community. Our theme song is the track Talk to Me by the band Eraser, and this episode featured compositions by the late, great French composer Éliane Radigue.